The 18 Strong Podcast, episode number 90 with Trillium Rose.
Simply doing the motion without the pressure doesn't really prepare you for doing the motion with pressure.
Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, where you get direct access to the world's greatest experts on training harder, practicing smarter, and playing better golf. Now, here's your host, Jeff Pellizzaro.
Hey, welcome to the show. This is Jeff Pellizzaro, the host of the 18 Strong Podcast. Thank you for joining me today. We, as always, have an incredible guest. We have Trillium Rose with us, and we're going to talk a lot about practice plans and how do you take what you're doing when you're in a practice situation, make it mimic as much as possible what you're going to be doing on the course, whether that be for enjoyment and recreation or whether that's for a competitive round of golf. And Trillium's an expert in this arena, so we're going to discuss a lot of these different things. Before we get into the episode, I just want to say thank you to everybody who has read the book, The Golfer's Guide to a Bogey-Proof Workout, which we just released a couple of weeks ago. It has done really, really well. We've gotten a lot of great feedback. In fact, Trillium showed me she had a copy of it when we were Skyping last week. And it's just cool to see so many people reading it, telling me that it's very easy to read, very quick to read. I like to joke that I don't have enough knowledge to fill up a big book, so I had to put it in very simple and quick read form. But I think that it's been very easily digested, and so I've got a lot of people telling me that they've started a new program or they've gotten some new desire to really get serious about what they're doing, their golf game, their fitness level, and just the way that they're living their life. So very cool. If you do have the book and you've read it, I would love to have you go on iTunes, or not iTunes, I'm always pumping iTunes reviews, would go on Amazon, leave a review for it, because that really does help to drive the awareness of the book and get more people to see it and, you know, a little bit more promotion for it. So thank you again. Now, Trillium Rose is an amazing woman. I had heard about her from many of my friends, my colleagues, about how incredible she is, the amazing things that she's doing, but had never had the chance to talk to her and, you know, really kind of dig in and know what she's all about. So just quick little bio. She's the head director of instruction at Woodmont Country Club, which is in Rockville, Maryland. She has her master's degree in motor learning, and she's going to give the background of, you know, going back to school to get this master's degree, and not just from any, you know, online university, but she went to the Teachers College of Columbia University, which is an incredible university for, you know, education and learning and all of this stuff. So she is, you know, the cream of the crop when it comes to motor learning and skill acquisition, but it is specifically tied into the golf world, which is so great for all of us here at 18 Strong and everybody in the golf world. So I have to thank the guys over at Super Speed Golf for, you know, really supporting the show, supporting this episode specifically, and kind of a unique tie-in. Kyle from Super Speed, Kyle Shea, is actually the one who introduced me to Trillium and helped us get this interview set up. So big thanks to Kyle. If you guys want any more info on Super Speed Golf, which is a tool that I use almost every day with my clients and with myself just to work on overspeed training and seeing huge results as far as increasing swing speed, go to 18strong.com/superspeed, and you'll find all the information there, where to go if you want to get your hands on them. And if you use the code 18strong, you're going to get a great discount from the guys over at Super Speed. So thank you to those guys. All right, we have a super special guest, so we're not going to delay any longer. I want to introduce you to Trillium. Hey, Trillium, welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, and thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on.
Absolutely. I've got so many friends and people in the industry that have told me so many good things about you, and, you know, just reading some of the work that you're doing and then the expertise that you have in motor learning. I know that we're going to dig into some pretty cool topics today for all the golfers that are listening, all the guys that are wondering, how do I take what I've been doing on the range, that ball that looks so good when I'm hitting it on the range, how do I actually bring that to the tee box? So very excited to learn more about your background and your expertise there. But before we get started, I want to know, is there a person or a book or maybe an experience in your life that you kind of look at and you say, you know, that's one experience that really kind of shaped me, or a person that I learned from that has really kind of shaped where I am today and what I'm doing today?
It's a big question for me, because I've always looked at others who have walked along the journey longer than I have, as as valuable. And I, especially people who are doing things that I find that I haven't really thought about or explored. So, I think it was high school where right out of high school, I started to think I need to have a board of directors. Not like a group of people that might sit around a table and discuss things, but more like a group of wiser people than I am that I could call to when I needed some feedback and some advice or things like that. So I've always kept a kind of a small council for things, anything like personal finances, or physical education research, or like starting businesses, or whatever it is, or there's how much information is there out there that that could be learned? Tons.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't expect to be an expert on any of it, but on all of it, rather. But rather, why don't I just work with people who are much better than I am? So I think circling back to your question specifically, like, is there one that's been really pivotal? It depends on the time. I think early on, when I first started in the golf industry as a teacher, so I started to play when I was very, very young, but I didn't think I'd be a golf professional for a long time. It wasn't until after college that I got into the business side of it, and that was a pretty big change for me. So I think in that first initial kind of stage where I was looking at what I could do as a golf professional and what my role might be and who I wanted to be and what I wanted to affect on people, I looked at Jim McLean, really, and I thought, this is someone who's taken golf instruction and made it academic. And he maybe not the first person to write a book on golf. Like, there's plenty of really, really good books that are old, but he kind of took it to another level and was accessible and living. So I thought that's somebody that I want to figure out what he's done and where he came up with all this stuff. So luckily, I put an application and I ended up working for him. So he was a big influence on how I looked at the golf swing and how I thought about what somebody might want to change, or if somebody should change their swing. So, I'd watched his big analysis of Ben Hogan. So he's like a big Ben Hogan ophile, and he seemed very specific with stuff, like could break down every single moment of every single phase of the swing, why it was important, and what could go wrong, and and then the 8-step swing, which of course made it even more, to me at the time, complicated. And so I knew that he had 11 books and he had all these different sort of various ways you could think about the swing, and he had lots of good tour players behind him. So I got there, and I was new, and I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and really excited to learn about, okay, so how do you fix a swing? And how am I going to go about, breaking everybody down? I'm going to do all these golf schools. I can't wait. And so he said something in passing to me, and it blew me out of the water because it was Jim McLean saying it. And he said, the golf swing's really overrated.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I thought, oh my gosh, everything I had thought you were about, what did you mean by? And meanwhile, I've told him this story, by the way, so he knows that this kind of eureka moment happened to me. So I said, how could you? Well, I didn't ask him this because I was too scared to ask him at the time. But it took me like a year to figure out what he meant, and I finally realized what he meant. What he meant after really spending a lot of time with this guy and people who had studied under him very, very closely, like Bobby Cole and Michael Hunt and Mariano Bartolome and Glenn Farnsworth, and lots of people who have spent a lot of time with Jim. Anyway, it's not about a swing looking a certain way, and it's not about the style, and it's not about having a certain movement because that's what everybody does. It's more about the functionality of the swing. And there are so many different ways to make a swing move and work that if you look at somebody in a way that's stylistic and putting a highlight on what someone's supposed to look like, you might miss that they have a very repeatable pattern, and you might actually mess them up.
Right.
And that was huge. And I think, and Jim being so, I mean, he's in 5 Hall of Fames. He's got, I mean, how many people has he influenced that are now teachers? I mean, the list is endless. But for him to say that, I think is really important. And I think that's caused a lot of, I think this caused a lot of good things in our business. I think we are now in a place where it's not so much style. I mean, now, of course, with more 3D analysis and a lot more data collection, I think we as an industry aren't teaching as much style, and I think that's really good. Yeah,
I definitely see that trend kind of moving away towards just a specific, the way that somebody looks, or, hey, let's side by side you with Rory if you totally don't swing like Rory, that kind of thing. I have to say that you said you kind of developed this idea of having a board of directors coming out of high school. I wish I had that insight at that age to start, putting together some of the people that I see doing the things I want to do, or the people I want to learn from. And I think that goes for anything. That goes for the junior golfers that we're working with. That goes for, in a business sense. I mean, looking at who's doing, it sounds so simple. Look at who's doing what you want to do, right, and try to learn from them. And then what I love is that you reached out to them to see if you could. And I that's what I've learned from this podcast is sometimes you just have to reach out and ask people for either help or guidance or to help share their message. And it's cool to see that you did that at such a young age and had that insight. So kudos to you on that, first of all. Give us a little bit more background on just kind of you and just kind of from the sky view. Who is Trillium? What did you play golf growing up, and then into college, and then how did you get where you are now? Obviously, you went and worked with Jim, but then give us a little insight on what you're doing today at Woodmont.
So, big picture, I'm the director of instruction at Woodmont, which is a private club outside of Washington, D.C. This is my 3rd season, so I've been in D.C. for about 8. This is my 8th year in D.C., but my 3rd at Woodmont, and before that, I was a teaching professional down the road at Chevy Chase Club, which is another private club, which only had really a seasonal opportunity. So I spent winters in Florida. So for 10 years, I spent the winter in Florida and the summer in the north. So I was a migrant worker,
a nomad.
Yeah, and I think when I started, I realized, all right, I was 23. I had 22 or 23, somewhere around there. And I didn't have a background in golf. Like I was working with people who had the PGM program behind them, or they had played on the golf team in high school. Whereas I played, there was no golf team when I first started high school. So I played lacrosse and I loved it. And then I ended up playing lacrosse in college because I loved it. So golf for me was just a summer sport. And so anyway, so by the time I was out of college, I was like, okay, I gotta go a little bit fast. I gotta learn. I gotta catch up. Mm-hmm. And if I want to catch up, that means I need to work double duty. So I found the best jobs that I could, north and south, and didn't really take much time off. So for 10 years, I went. 5 of those were spent with Jim McLean, and then a couple were at a private club in Vero Beach, and a few others were in Palm Beach. And I realized that after 10 years of doing that, I realized, okay, this is taking a little toll.
Yeah.
And I realized like my own learning professionally was starting to plateau a little bit. And not that I was getting bored per se, but it was starting to get really easy, like really easy. And I kind of do better when I'm challenged a bit. Like on a bicycle, when you set it to the hard setting, you kind of feel like you have to work. I like that. I like to work. I like to feel like I'm working. I like to feel like I'm learning. So I decided that I needed to do something that was going to challenge me. And I also had a lot of outstanding questions that I was getting from students, and that I was finding that I didn't know the answer to on my own. And essentially, I had so much focus on technical work and on technique, and I spent a nice amount of time with Dr. Neal, who's a world-renowned biomechanist. He was positioned with Jim McLean too. So I was very heavily focused on what to do with people, and I didn't have a whole lot of answers in the how to do it department.
Right.
And that wasn't sitting well with me. Somebody would ask, "Well, should I watch this? Should I watch it in slow motion over and over?" And I was like, "I don't know." Sure.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Or God, you get someone who's 55 and who's never played golf before. But they've played tennis, so they bring all these other biases to the table. So what's that going to do to someone's learning? And how do I have to go about somebody who's had some kind of an injury and they need to relearn something? Is it even possible? How do those learning phases, change? What changes over time and in someone's developmental arc? So anyway, I went back to school because I wanted to learn some of this stuff. I started reading it. Actually, I was reading a lot about this stuff on my own, but I found a lot of it was good. But I wanted to get into the actual research myself and be able to kind of pick through it on my own and not necessarily take someone else's word for it. Mm-hmm. So, and I think this is a pretty personal point, but I think being a female and a golf instructor, I also felt like, to get credibility the way you would as a man, you have to do a little bit more. And I hate to admit this, because I would like to think of myself as equal with all men, but I think I'm definitely in a man's world in a way. And so going back to school was also a way just to have some, I think it was like 5% that 90% I really wanted to know all this stuff. But there was a part of me that was like, in order to really have a seat at the table, I kind of have to bring something big to the table. Yeah. And not having played in college, not having played professionally, not having any tour players at my disposal, is like, I'm not going to get the credibility for any of those things at the moment. But that's okay. I'm way more interested in this thing. And so what's ended up happening, and I'm kind of surprised, but I'm happy, is that the conversation has become much, much more about motor learning and learning, like how we deliver this information. And so I don't know, I think my timing has been good, because the conversation is ready for this. Mm-hmm. And I feel pretty excited that people really want to learn. I think that's the best.
And so you actually went back to school and got your master's, is it, in motor learning, control?
I did. Yeah, so I went back and got a master's degree in motor learning and control from Columbia Teachers College. So it's an education school. It's Columbia's oldest. It's the oldest education school, and it's really big too. They came up with the school bus. Isn't
really?
That cool?
No, yeah. I didn't know that.
And the Happy Birthday song.
Really?
Yeah, isn't that great?
That's crazy.
So it's a huge education school, and it was. Of course, I wanted to go back. I wanted to go back to an education school because I'm an educator, and I was interested in teaching movement. So motor learning was a natural fit, and it's so motor learning is like a crossover between neurophysiology and psychology. And in the 70s, those two domains started to overlap a little bit, and motor learning was born.
So how do you, knowing all this now that you get a new golfer, they come out, what is it, where do you even start with somebody? Because how do you know how somebody learns? Because I assume we all have different ways that we learn. So that's something that you have to kind of analyze and figure out. And do you have certain tests for that? And then, where do you kind of go from there with somebody that's just coming to see you for the first time?
Well, depends. Okay, so it depends on what I do. Really depends on a lot of things. So I ask a lot of questions. So if someone comes up and usually the first thing I ask is what what can I do for you? Why are you here? How can I help you? And that question answers a lot right off the bat. Someone wants to be, they want to be on their high school team, or they want to win the high school championship. They improve their tournament play and their scoring average is already 75, or do they want to learn how to hit the ball and they don't want to be embarrassed? Like
Right.
two completely
Way different
goals. Yeah. And way different, okay, have you played other sports? I like to know if someone's played other sports and to what level they've played. Someone's played a really high level, anything, that means they've gone through the whole process of learning it early and going through the stages of complexity. And then that experience, I think, is really valuable because you can draw on that and say, okay, this is where you are relative to what you've done in that sport. So you can't expect to have the same types of results so quickly. I mean, how long have you played soccer, let's say? And man, side note, I find that really good athletes in other sports make really difficult golf students.
Really?
Yeah.
That's an interesting fact.
Because their expectations are high, and because they know what it's like to be good at something.
Yeah.
And often they are able to produce a result very quickly by listening to directions, but that does not mean you've learned it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a huge difference between learning and performance. And that's not easy to just tell someone. I mean, I can tell you, but it's not easy to convince someone that they're not going to be able to do it every single time just because they can do it here in front of me.
Right. So yeah, how do you deal with that? Because I have somebody in mind right now that played, I won't even say what sport, but played very professional level, and is a guy that, naturally, athletically, could probably just kind of pick something up and do it. But golf, and he can play very well, but can't do what he wants to do every time and gets frustrated. So how do you break that barrier? How do you start to make that crossover?
I mean, I know exactly. Not who you're talking about, but I've
the
just
type.
seen it so many times. Yeah. So how do you get someone to break through that? Well, I can't be somebody else, really. I can't put myself into their body and say, hey, wake up. But I can. There's an old adage, and I don't know who said this or when they said it, but I love it. And it's if they haven't learned, you haven't taught. So I feel like, okay, yeah, I'm saying I can't teach, I can't convince you necessarily, but I can do I can give a good effort for trying.
Right.
So in this case, somebody has that experience, I really try to remind them of it. So if you play Brahms on the piano and you know what that's like, if you give me a piano, just because I have the music and the piano doesn't mean I should be able to play Brahms, right?
Right.
I mean, that should be a pretty obvious assumption. So sometimes little analogies like that can help wake somebody up, is to realize where they are on the scale. Mm-hmm. Learning another language, that's really similar too, and so I like playing an instrument, learning a language. Those are all good crossovers if somebody's never played a sport. I also try to use what they have if they have something that's already really repeatable. So oftentimes with tennis players, I find that their release is really a certain way. They tend to just really kind of get jammed up with their arms. And this is a big sort of blanket statement, but I've kind of let a lot of things go that I find aren't there aren't like pressing issues, mm-hmm. as long as I know that they can rely on them. And if they can rely on them, then that's great.
Right, yeah, repeatable.
So someone who has a habit it's repeatable, and so if it's repeatable, why mess with it? So I think it kind of goes in people's favors too.
Gotcha. So let's talk a little bit about just developing like ways to practice, because I know that so many golfers that I know, and I am guilty of this myself, going out to the range and you get your bucket of balls and you start hitting shots or doing whatever you're doing. But I know that you're kind of an expert in developing practice plans. So can you give us an idea first? What is a practice plan? What does that even mean to somebody in your position when you're working with a golfer? And let's kind of take the example of the guy that has a 40-hour-a-week job. He might have a couple kids at home. He wants to plays golf on the weekends, probably has a little fitness regimen. How do we squeeze it all in?
Yeah, this is my wheelhouse.
Yeah, right.
The normal person who's got a job and they have kids and they like golf and they can play golf on the weekends mostly, but they're not going to put in 80 hours over the course of a month into practice. So, that was another thing I really wanted to know is, are there any silver bullets in practice? I mean, any corners that we can cut? Is there any fat that we can cut out? How do we get somebody who's an average athlete who has a low interest in sitting on the range, but a high interest in getting better in the game? And how do we spend the time most efficiently so that we can really maximize the results? So, okay, first of all, what's a practice plan? So a plan is like anything else you do in your business. It's a punch list, and it's a way of organizing the hour or half hour or 20 minutes or whatever. It's here's my game plan. It's your blueprint. It's your map. I need to go from point A to point B, and I need to make some steps in my levels of mastery to get where I want to go. And there are certain skills that I need to hone in on before I can move to the next level. So I think if I just take a random sample in my head, like a random student who comes to me, usually they already have a pretty good sense of what's going on. Maybe that there are a couple of weak links here and there, and there's so I've got to figure out what their game plan is. That's what a golfer should be able to kind of look at their whole game comprehensively and say, okay, this is where stats come in really handy, because they can give you good answers. Numbers. I love numbers and I love data, and I love being able to see through numbers that somebody may or may not have kind of a part of their game that's where it should be or where they want it to be.
Do you have like a favorite like app or something that you recommend people use to track stats at all?
I like Golf Stat Lab. I think that's one that I recommend, and that's Cameron McCormick's app. But there are so many that are coming out.
Yeah.
I haven't used all of them, but I'm certainly open. If someone comes to me and they have one, hey, great, whatever. It's better than nothing. And some people have even kept track with their own, Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah, the accountants.
I think is fun to see too. Why not? I love that. So, all right, you've got a game. You can see, I can see. Let's say you're hitting 30% of your shots on par fours are from outside 190 yards. So why is that? Are you missing it off the tee, or are you playing from tees that are too far back, or are you what's going on? So that gives one example of something that we could look at technically that we might say, okay, this might be a weak link of yours. Or if you look at someone's scrambling percentage, or they have 40 putts per round, and it's pretty obvious that you got to get that lower. But I made the mistake of spending too much time in the range one time early on in my teaching, and I didn't go out on the course with that person, and I had listened to what he said. He said his driving was the issue. He needed to drive it farther. It was all about his drives. So he had some miss it. So I figured, okay, I could see this duck call. You do need to have a good drive. So I bought in. But then we went on the course, and I learned that he had the chipping yips. And so, that was the issue. And
right.
He had never told me. So this is why I'm much, much more inclined to A, force someone to show me their stats, or B, go on the golf course and see what's going on in situ, in the environment that they're going to be playing. So I can see for myself what happens, what kind of decisions are somebody making out there.
Yeah, the decision part I have some questions on too, because most of the time you see people working on mechanics so often. But how much is it the decision making that really ends up being where they could get most bang for your buck? Like you said, silver bullets. If you can go out and shave 5 strokes off because you're making better decisions, as opposed to working 10 more hours on your release.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I look at somebody's game as kind of a like a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, and I'm just looking over someone's shoulder, and they've got the edges down. They, maybe someone who's like a 2 or 3 handicap, maybe they only have 1 or 2 pieces that they need to get, and someone who's a beginner is just still trying to put the colored pieces up. They're just trying to figure out what's what and what's going on. So everyone's a little different. So I try to do cast a lot of wide nets. Like going on the golf course would be an example of casting a wide net, because I never know what I'm going to see.
Right.
But I'm certainly going to see something. But working on the range is also kind of critical, because then I can see what somebody is capable of doing and what they're capable of missing. So let's go back to a practice plan, because I think this, it's hard for people to take their bag and a pile of golf balls and make use of it.
Yeah, agreed.
And if you remember this really simple principle, I think it helps. And that is, we get good at what we practice. And if you're practicing just hitting the same shot over and over, you're going to get good at that. That's fine, but that's more exercise than it is really deep, rich practice. So if you only get to hit one shot, you need to put yourself in a place where you're hitting one shot. And so, all right, but you've got an hour. So hitting one shot, what do you mean hit one shot? Okay, so limit it then. Limit it to say 5 or 3 shots. So you're making each shot feel more real and feel more like what you would do if you were on a golf course. Then the other thing people really, really have a hard time doing is paying attention to the ball once they've hit it, when it's on the range.
Yeah.
Like
Guilty.
Legitimately analyzing it. It's one thing to see it just sort of go out there high in the air, but it's another to actually have some boundaries set in your head and say, okay, if it goes past that flag over there, that's in water. And on the other side, if it goes in there, it's in water. Okay, so this matters now. So you suddenly have these scenarios in your head, which are just like a golf course, and you get a sense of how good you really are. Like, are we good, or are we thinking that we're good? Because we hit it great on the 10th time and it's just out there. So, okay, pay attention to the results. I actually like measuring them and giving yourself targets. So one of my favorite game to play with somebody who's on the, like the 10, 15 and under handicap range, someone who can get it around and it can shoot in the 80s. So Jack Nicklaus always practiced with the target line in mind. And his idea was that the line was meant to establish your ball flight, really. So the target is the end of the line. If you're going to draw it, you start it to the right, it curls back in, but it doesn't cross. If you're going to fade it, it starts left, curls in, but doesn't cross. So you've got draw, fade, and then if it goes over, you're hitting your draw path, it goes over, that's a hook. And if you start it left and it goes over, that's a slice. And so suddenly now when you look at your ball flight in that light, you have much more self-criticism. And you've got a way of saying, okay, that was a good shot or that was not a good shot. And so if someone's working on draws, I'm going to have them start it right, and if it crosses the line, that's negative point. And if it starts to the right and it kind of leaks and just sort of blocks right, it might be like a 3-pointer. Okay. And if it curls in close, there's 5 points. So you 5 points, 3 points, and if you're way off, I might give you 1. If you're in the right rough. So that's a way that my students can analyze their game, and I've got lots of students that do that now. So they hit a good shot, I'd say, well, that's a 3-pointer. So that's the kind of thing that you want to do, and you can do that with anything. You can do it with putting, not necessarily the ball flight with putting, but you could have the same type of measurement system with putting. So I'm sure everyone's heard of this game where you putt past the cup into the little end zone, and this is for distance control for lag putting. But if you're short, it's a negative points. So if you're past, but too far past, it's no points taken away or given. But if you're short, it's nothing. So that's a way of people for really to crank up their awareness and say, okay, this is better than I thought, or this is worse than I thought.
Yeah, kind of gamifying it, or just making it have some sort of stakes and boundaries, as opposed to going out and just kind of hitting. So let me ask you this, and this is because this is what happened to me this past weekend. I took my little guy, my 8-year-old, out to the range and went to the batting cages, and then we went and just hit some golf balls, and I noticed that I'm not hitting very well. What do you do when you're not hitting well? You're not hitting well, and it's very tempting to just keep banging away. Is that the solution, or what would you suggest in a situation like that? And we were just out having fun, but how do you self-correct, or do you self-correct, and where do you go?
Thanks for bringing that up, because I think that happens to a lot of people. And the answer is to just stop what you're doing and switch gears and try something else that you do well. So I like to give people this kind of safety net shot. So if their swing starts to unravel, they can go back and do something that they know is going to work. I call it like a chip shot. Start with a chip shot. Mm-hmm. Go back to the most simple of shots. No wrist hinge, really. Just feel like everything's like your sternum and your hands are traveling at the same time. Kind of let your pelvis kind of glide through the shot, and just make some good contact. It's like usually that gives you a little more confidence. You settle down a little bit. You realize, okay, I can play this game. I haven't lost it. And then you can build up from there. So whatever pattern that you were doing that wasn't working, maybe it just was a fluke. Maybe there could be so many reasons why something wasn't working well. And maybe you had a little twinge in your wrist, and you were favoring it, and so the face was shut. It could be anything. So the best is just to leave it alone for a minute. Come back to it later, especially after you've done something that you can do well.
Yeah, it's funny. As this was going on, I was thinking, boy, this is going to be a great question this week when I talked to Trillium. So it was funny. And then I kind of just shifted a few more of the golf balls over to my little guy's side and let him hit the rest of those. On a bit of a different angle, kind of the same stuff, there's many times where we're doing very well practicing. Say you're on the range and you're hitting the ball really well, or your chipping's great, or I have a client that I know he's been putting a lot of time into his bunker play, and he's lights out when he's practicing, but then goes to the course, and very high level golfer, low single digit handicapper. He's like, Jeff, I don't know what's going on. I go on the course and I'm all over the place. What do you suggest, or where do you start digging there?
Oh, this is I get this one all the time. I love this one. This is a complicated answer, and I can make it a simple one. I'll give the simple one, and then I'll kind of touch on some of the stuff behind it, which is the like kind of the sciencey stuff, which is what I really like. So here's the simple thing. When we're working on the range, it's psychologists call it arousal. The state of arousal is usually not the same as when you're on the golf course in a tournament. Mm-hmm. It's just not. The stakes are not as high. And so simply doing the motion without the pressure doesn't really prepare you for doing the motion with pressure. So I argue that if somebody is having trouble doing it in a tournament, sign up for more tournaments. Yeah. Play in more tournaments. And I'll especially tell this to some of the the high school players that I work with. Sign up for some tournaments that are on the easy side. So you don't feel like, obviously you need to be in the ones that are hard for you too, but you should sign up a third of them should be ones that you could win. A third should be ones that you'd have to win if you were really playing well, and a third should be ones that you can't win at all. Like you're just in it. And I got that from the men's coach at Columbia when I was there, Rich Mueller, who's a wonderful golf coach, and so that's what he was telling his students. And I thought that really makes a ton of sense from a motor learning perspective too. So that's the rule that I go by. And so let's say that someone's not really playing in tournaments, they're just going out to play.
Right.
When they go, I just can't, forget tournament, I can't do it when I go on the golf course. So that's kind of a different thing, because then the first question I want to know is, do you really know had you really learned it in the first place?
Yeah.
So you're doing it, and this kind of goes back to our spending quality time on the range, like you said, gaming or skill-based practice, where you're working on your skills and you're measuring it and you're benchmarking and you're setting up scenarios where you're actually keeping track of how you're doing so you can go back and try to beat it next week. So that's a really useful way to spend your time, because then when you go onto the golf course, you've been in a situation where it matters, because that you're doing this for a point.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little close. So practicing with purpose makes going on the golf course a little easier. So let's say you haven't been doing that and you think you're really good, but you're not. You think you know how to hit that 7-iron, but when you're on the range, it takes you 10 shots to hit that 7-iron. So, so out of 10 shots, how many out of your 10 cross the line? How many points did you get with your 10 shots with a 7-iron? So if you only got 2 points, then you can't have really high expectations when you go on the golf course.
Right.
So I think that's kind of another way to look at it. So then the sciencey part has to do a lot more with the kind of what goes on in your brain. So when you're learning a skill for the first time, your prefrontal cortex is very active. That's the executive command center, kind of the front part of your brain. So you are telling yourself, all right, I need to feel my hands a little higher in the backswing. And so that's literally a sentence in your head that's going on in your head. You're saying, I need to feel my hands higher. That is an explicit thought. Well, putting the hands higher and being able to feel them is really the part that matters. So after you do it a number of times, you don't have to tell yourself quite as much, but your body starts to get the feel, and there's some neural processing that's going on that's solving for that. But for that to become a really solid memory, it has to have happened a lot, and it has to have happened in a lot of different scenarios. And it can't just be you doing it over and over and over and like, okay, I'll just stick a little training aid on my arm, and so it'll force me to do that. That's just the worst. That's like the worst way to train, because you're not really thinking about it. It's just doing it for you. So you have to solve for it, and you have to think about it. Now, if say for 15 years you've played with low hands in the backswing, that means that pattern is probably pretty strong. And usually the oldest patterns rise to the top. The old ones are really hard to beat, and those become kind of the go-to habits, unless you can overdo it with a new one, but that takes a whole lot of work. So I think we just have to be careful about making big swing changes and then going out on the golf course. And if we do make big swing changes, make sure you put a lot of time into it. And so I don't know about your buddy who's working in bunkers. Is he trying new things? Is he tinkering? I don't know.
He very well may be. Definitely a tinkerer.
So that could be part of the problem.
Well, and I think, sometimes when you're out there and you're practicing and you're working on something and you hit a couple good, then you hit a couple bad, you're like, oh, well, maybe I didn't do this. And so you start changing little things, and it's like you're trying to self-correct, but you never really got it in the first place. So you're self-correcting something that wasn't correct already, and it makes it very difficult. All right, Trillium, just a few last questions for you. First one, favorite here on the 18 Strong podcast is, are you a Caddyshack or Happy Gilmore fan?
Oh, well, they're both great, but definitely.
Which one, if you had to pick one, which one would it be?
Well, I'm biased because I know Bill Murray and I know how bright he is. He's such a great person, and I have so much admiration for his work. And I think most people don't realize how, and his IQ is probably 170.
Oh my gosh.
What a genius he is. So definitely Caddyshack.
Love it. All right, if there was one person that you could play a round of golf with, ride in a cart with for 18 holes, or even just carry their bag, present, past, future, who would it be? Anyone in the world. Doesn't have to be golf related.
Man, you gave me questions. I should have read those questions.
I know. I sent them ahead of time for reasons.
Gosh, dang it. That's a good one. I think I would. I'm such a sucker for brainiacs. I really love smart people. I think I'd probably choose someone who's been someone who's been a leader in office. I have to say it's been kind of cool having President Obama so close by. I probably want to play with Obama. I think that'd be pretty fun.
Wow. Yeah, that'd be pretty amazing. All right. With everything you have going on, it's May of 2016. What would you say is kind of the thing that has you most excited right now and your mission moving forward for the rest of this year?
So what has me most excited, I'm working on a little project.
Love it.
So, yep, I can't announce it yet, but the project it's a tool for people who want to improve their golf, but haven't quite committed to the game yet. So I'm inspired by all of the people who've come to my lesson tee, who I could have helped them before they even got there. So by the time they get to a lesson, they're already up and ready to go. And so I'm using sort of movement science and golf instruction, kind of blending it together to get people better at golf without paying a lot of money and without having a golf course.
Cool.
Is that big?
I love the sound of that. You're going to have to keep me informed on that one for sure. All right. And then before we let you go, any last pieces of advice for the audience, and then let them know where they can find you and find out more about Trillium Rose.
Thanks. I think it's important to respect the movement that you have, and if you are a tinkerer, beware. Just beware. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And work on the shots that cause you the most strokes. Don't work on trying to look a certain way.
Love it.
Thanks, Jeff. My website is trilliumrose.com, and I love having feedback. Or you could follow me on Twitter, Trill Golf, or Instagram, Trill Golf, and I'm always happy to hear from people.
Awesome. Well, we love what you're doing. Like I said, I've heard nothing but amazing things from the colleagues that I respect and that see what you're doing, have presented with you, and have seen you in the trenches. And they've all told me, you have to get her on the show. She's amazing. The things she's doing, the golfers she works with are doing amazing things. So congratulations, and thank you for help grow this lovely, wonderful game.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Jeff.
You got it. Okay, there you have it. Trillium Rose. I mean, what an amazing lady. So generous, so kind with her time, and she's doing really amazing things with her golfers. But from the research side and the scientific side, nobody knows this stuff better than she does. But as you can tell, she has a great way of relaying that information and helping us to utilize it in a very practical setting. So I highly encourage you to get out there and try gamifying some of your practice. Try figuring out, okay, what are ways that I can take what I'm doing and not just continue my old routine that hasn't produced any real results. But let's take some of this advice that Trillium gave and start putting in some rules and some boundaries around the way that you're practicing. And then let's pay more attention. How is that transferring over to the course? And if it's not, what are we going to do to change it? All right, one more thank you to the guys over at Super Speed Golf. Go check them out, 18strong.com/superspeed. I'm telling you, the overtraining tools that they have honestly changed the way that I do some of the training with my golfers for swing speed to increase their distance, simply because this tool is as close as you can get to, replicating what you're going to do on the course, just like Trillium was talking about. So we've seen huge results. Go check those guys out. And then thanks to everybody that has read the book, left a review. Would love more reviews, but always appreciate everybody that is here listening to the 18 Strong podcast, and let us know how we can make this show better. I will talk to you very, very soon. Train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.
Thanks for listening to the 18 Strong podcast at www.18strong.com. And remember, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.